I'd like to call the Tuesday, March 20th, 2024 meeting of the Finance and Warrant Committee to order. First on the agenda is public comment. Seeing none, I'll move to our next agenda item, which is a follow-up on information requested at the 3/9/24 meeting. And Michelle, has everybody been able to access what the updates were? You just want to...
Okay, so I can go through them, and I know John and Brady have made lots of notes for us, so. The first thing was our average residential tax comparisons with adding additional towns. We have that in front of us?
Yep. Can we get that?
So are we going to go through them as we go, or just want me to list to see if we have the info?
Why don't we just make sure we have the info? Any questions about any of the updates that we received? When you mention any, I think this particular product, as we're looking at it, is very, very good.
Yeah, we probably have to kind of digest it and talk
Yeah.
about it later.
So we could take a look at that, and if any questions about that, we can either ask them tonight, or we can put them on our list for the next meeting, okay?
The next was an item I think that they were going to talk to with the Youth Commission about just one of their lines, if it should stay or move. The other one was for fire chief and HR,
Yes.
analysis of cost savings. If there were additional firefighters hired, what savings that might bring us and impacts on overtime. So I think both of those items, 2 and 3, we haven't heard about. Number 4 was DPW. What would the increase be? Oh, that one was resolved during the meeting.
Yep.
Yep. Facilities org chart says we have.
Which we got the other night, yep,
That's in an email?
yep. I know, it was handed out last,
handed out.
Okay,
when the school department was in.
that's right, that's right.
Which I might add, that's the first organizational chart in my years on this board, Kevin. It was very helpful.
Health Department corrected budget, we will have that when we're deliberating. Debt schedule, that we have too.
We have that ton,
We have that tonight?
we have that tonight that was handed out. Excuse me?
Less beautiful.
The less eye appealing, is that the term? Yeah.
And also, information on OPEB we have.
We do? Wait a minute.
Is that true, in front of us now? It says pending finance committee review. Or is it just what's in the notes, or is it a handout?
So far, yeah, we don't really hand out on that.
Okay, so there's notes in the spreadsheet on that.
Thank you.
On the OPEB?
Yep.
I wrote pending review. I was,
John, why don't you come up, because you're going to be there anyway.
You thought I wrote what, the note?
I did put a note in there about the review from our actuary on that. I do have that, I just didn't print it out. I apologize.
No, that's okay. I think everybody can access it in the,
But you have it, a response on the sheet, though.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, GIC, this isn't necessarily for our deliberations this time around, but Leon was going to look at the process and timing if we were going to consider GIC for health insurance. Blue Hills correction is all set.
Can I add something to that, though?
Yep.
There was some back and forth with Brady and myself, and I think I included you, Michelle, and maybe John. I think the Norfolk Aggie budget line we did not discuss during our hearings, and I think there was an increase from what was initially showing on Leon's budget message. So I think that's something that we need to address. I think the difference was about $40,000, if I recall correctly.
So is it right that there was not actually a mistake? It was just that one number had Norfolk?
Well, the
Aggie with
Norfolk
it?
number was in the total regional education number in Leon's budget message, and that was the difference. But then,
Yeah, I see.
subsequent to that, that number, that $35,000 number had changed to, I think, 76,000 and some change, something like that. So, and I don't think we discussed that at all during the process, unless I'm mistaken. I don't recall at least.
Norfolk Aggie, no, it was not.
Yeah.
'Cause
And
that's-
it's in our budget book.
Their number changed.
Their number did change, right?
Okay. So we'll probably discuss that when we're deliberating.
Exactly.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure we didn't lose sight of it.
Okay, so I won't say complete, I'll say,
Because Norfolk Aggie is actually a bill through the county that we get, so.
okay. Number of homeless students comparison over years, that was for DPS. I don't think we have that.
Thought we got that in an email? No?
We did?
Maybe I dreamt it. Swear I saw the
Yeah,
number.
I don't know, I haven't looked at emails.
Yes, there was. That was the one that Ian sent to me, and then I sent
Yeah.
out to everybody.
We did get that.
So that we did get.
It was like 80-something.
All right, so I'll just.
It increased.
Yeah.
Also for public schools, actual impact on levy of increase in spending, consideration of grants and state money come in that offset the increase. So was that all part of the same email?
No, that was
That
not.
came up at the meeting, about the net effect of the increase in the school budget, because we're taking in
Yeah.
more state aid.
So did they
Some of
address
which
that?
goes to the general fund, and it was to offset that so that we get a net figure.
As I recall, Ian said he was going to be talking to John about that. I don't know if he's opened up discussions, if that's something that,
Could I just back up to the public schools for a second? One of the things I don't think we asked for that I think might be relevant is the percent of the overall town operating budget that the schools, over time, that I suspect, that I don't know it for a fact, but I suspect that the share of the overall operating budget devoted to schools is increasing pretty consistently year after year. And I'd be curious what it was 10 years ago versus now, for example, and what the trend is.
what you're talking about is the appropriation that they get from town meeting.
Exactly, the appropriation for public schools, not counting the regional schools,
Yeah.
just Dedham Public Schools. What the percentage change, if any, has been, so that we can see what the trend is.
And the other part of that, too, would be that the benefit package, the health and care for the school department is paid through the municipal budget, so that could be a factor, too, in terms of, because the health care has certainly increased over the past 10 years, anyway. So what you're looking for, Kevin, is what the percentage of the total town budget, operating budget, has been to the schools per year for the past 10 years.
Right.
Is that clear? Okay, thank you.
So I've added that. And
Yeah.
then the only other thing we already had in here was the excess levy estimate, if it was assuming the town manager's FY '25 budget, passed, was that included? And Brady had answered yes, but there are items to clarify because of the difference between the town meter's recommendation and the school's recommendation. Is that right?
Yes.
So I don't know, do you want her to answer that now, or do you want us
Do you have a response to that at this point, or? Yeah,
Yes, first response is the 1.5 is given the town manager's recommendation, but the way the school reported their budget and the way we report their budget are slightly different. We added some operating capital to their facilities budget, so. No. Microphone. You want me to speak in the microphone? Can't hear you.
yes.
Really wanted
Come to
Leon
the
answer this
table.
question.
I think what you're talking about is, originally Leon's was 7%, but then his budget presentation was 7.2, because
Well,
those,
So essentially, he pulled the education budget down to 7%, but the school facilities budget was outside of that. So the combined number is very similar to the overall 8% budget that the schools presented.
Okay.
So the school's 8.06 total budget would leave 1.5 levy class.
Okay.
I know that that's,
Wait a minute,
So
1.5?
it's virtually, yes.
It's pretty much the same $1.5 million that will fluctuate slightly as we get closer, but it will not.
the budget the schools presented would leave 1.5 in capacity.
I was in
Okay,
agreement with
okay.
you.
Are you
We're
sure
agreeing.
about, are you sure about that?
Yes, unfortunately I am. I know it doesn't sound right.
So the 8% that the school department had proposed, that the school committee had voted, Leon's was 7, but then went to 7.2, I believe.
So Leon pulled the education budget down to 7%. But we moved some of their capital items from capital to operating. capital.
Ongoing capital, yeah,
Yes.
okay.
So overall, their number is essentially the 8.06 that the schools presented to you.
Okay,
Question.
go ahead.
So
Liz?
what the school presented the other day, did that include the operating capital that is
The number,
factored differently in Leon's budget? Is that?
the numbers are, yes, yes.
So if Leon
Essentially,
hadn't
yes.
moved the whatever, wherever,
Mhm.
to operating capital, well, I don't know what it was, but to operating capital, it would have been about an 806.
It would have been lower than 8. But since we moved the capital into their operating, the budget they presented, he's essentially recommending the 8.06.
Okay.
But in a different way.
Yes.
He's like basically
Right,
cut it
okay.
to 7%, but then added some other stuff that they
Somewhere
didn't
else.
have.
From the capital, yes.
Yeah.
Mike?
Did I hear that the school facilities is not in that budget?
It is, it's in that, the budget they presented, the 8.06 increase, it's included.
Okay. But it wasn't in Leon's?
It was, they're held separately in separate budget lines in the way we represent things, which I think we're gonna fix moving forward.
Just in a little bit of clarifying manner here, the way that the schools historically in Dedham have been doing things and generating budgets have been slightly different than using the financial system. So what we're seeing here, and this is a case in point, is the reconciling of the two together. So the way that the one's presenting and the way that we're presenting, we're coming together finally. So all the hard work that Ian and Leon and Nan were all doing together, this is the sort of the outcome. Effectively, we're all on the same page. But that's the background story without getting too deep involved into that. This is what's the outcome.
Just want to make sure I understand this right. So the totals of the town manager's recommendation and the school committee's request add up. Is there any divergence in what makes up those two things? Or is it essentially the same recommendation?
It's going to boil down to effectively the same recommendation.
Yeah,
It's-
While shifting some
while shifting
capital
between the
burden
lines.
into the operating.
I'm sorry, my hearing is horrible, I apologize. But, so it's essentially the same items are being recommended to be funded. Is that right?
Well, he brought the education budget down and increased the facilities.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, that's helpful.
But anybody?
Nope.
But the school came in, and their presentation to us was focused on the 8%. Leon's recommendation is 7.2.
So we're learning lessons about the way that we display those line increases.
Yes.
I know that you'll notice on different sheets, the operating capital is either included or pulled out. And so the percentage increases sometimes appear differently. And I think that going forward, we're going to stop doing that because it just makes things more confusing.
Could we get like a single sheet of
Yes.
paper that
Yes.
just highlights the differences?
Yeah.
There's got to be some clarification, because this is a major part of this budget.
Yeah.
And what we're hearing, and what was in the town manager's presentation, as I recall, and I'll get it out here right now, is 7.2.
Yeah, so that had the operating capital of every department is pulled out of each department. That's how the town has historically presented this information.
So it's an apple banana thing.
Yeah.
So
So I
they-
think, it sounds like we should just discuss this more at deliberations, but they can give us some information for then that will make it clearer, right?
I think you're correct. I think this information has to be clarified as soon as possible,
Before deliberation.
way before deliberations, because this is an extremely important, and I'm being redundant, I know, this is extremely part of this budget process. And there's
Leon?
confusion, I'm seeing confusion here, and it makes me nervous. Michael?
I just have a question regarding what you just said, Brady. If this is the way we've been representing information in previous years, why is it an issue now? I mean, I don't understand why all of a sudden this is an issue with a particular budget that's a pretty big part of the mix. Is that something you can answer, or has something changed?
No, I recall really similar discussions last year. I think the numbers were smaller because we're talking about town departments. But the same thing happened with operating capital.
Are we talking, if I may interrupt, are we talking about representing the operating, the capital that moves to operating for recurring capital expenses, like replacing automobiles, that type of thing? So you're saying if we stop, representing it in both places, this won't be an issue? Is that what you're saying?
That's what we've been discussing, that it'll be much simpler, not to pull it out of each department's budget and show it on a separate line.
So for this, it's pretty much the same theory then, in the sense that you have information that is moving from capital to operating on the school side. The numbers aren't changing, they're just appearing in a different place.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And
That makes
again,
sense.
a summary sheet and some additional information to clarify everything that we're saying here and there will be very helpful. And
Okay.
And if I may,
Certainly.
I think it would be helpful in that representation to see where all the parts of the education budget showing up, Leon's recommendation and the school's proposal. So all the different parts, where they all show up, and then how the two compare, whether or not it's the same or not.
Could I
Michael?
follow, simple administrative question though, but Leon will be updating his budget message to the 8% and not the 7.1 that's in there now?
No.
It is in there, it's just shown on separate lines, which is what we're discussing, like, it'll
Oh.
be simpler if it's on one line. But we could provide an updated,
What we need is a clarification, because I stand corrected, I'm looking at his budget message, and when we come to the Dedham District Education, I'm 7.2, it's 7.3, he's saying. That's what his recommendation is in terms of an increase.
and is there a separate line on there for operating capital?
No.
But
Oh, operating capital, wait a minute. 153.8%.
Right.
Yeah, 1,130,000. So what I'm hearing, anybody can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, we got some confusion here, big time.
if I,
Go ahead.
if I may, I mean, it's also, honestly, it's a little misleading. I mean, you look on the expenditures page, and there's a total for schools totaling the Dedham Regional District, and it comes to 7.1%. So the average person reading this is going to think, based on the message, the town budget message, that school increase is 7.1%. If this isn't being updated, I think that's a mistake.
So it is updated, it's, I totally understand what you're saying, and I think in that budget message, even there's different ways of displaying total education, because like you just said, we have DPS, we have regional education, we have school facilities, we have operating capital, and in different places, we display those numbers in different ways. And there's no confusion about the numbers, but there is a confusion about the way we show the numbers. So I think you're right in that we need to display things more clearly and have one simple message.
Kevin?
And let me just say this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my impression is that the numbers, as between just Dedham Public Schools, isolating the agricultural school and Blue Hills for a minute, because actually they both came in lower, I think, in terms of the percentage increase, is that the town manager and the school department are recommending the same total expenditure roughly, but the expenditure, the town manager's, is tilted more towards capital. and less towards operating, and the school department is the opposite. A little more emphasis, not by huge amounts, I would assume, but that's the difference. But the total, and that the town manager's number doesn't need to be corrected, it probably just needs to be explained in terms of what, am I understanding that right? Okay,
The numbers haven't changed yet.
okay.
Michelle?
Yeah, the single page would
Yeah,
be
so I
really
understand that
helpful.
too, but just a question about kind of our role. Because I know that unlike the town budget, with the school budget, we don't have control over particular lines,
Right.
just the bottom line. Is that true related to operating capital too? Because if I'm hearing this right, their numbers are the same, but Leon is kind of taking from the operating to put in operating capital, right? And so can we recommend either Leon's configuration or the school's configuration, or is our power only the number? And then the schools will actually get to decide if they're doing that operating capital or not, or no, because otherwise that operating capital would need to be voted as other capital. I don't know if anyone knows this answer, but
No, but your question makes sense.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We can let Leon clarify this at a later time.
Okay.
And I think that's probably the best case in point at this point for clarification. And that way we can compile all the questions together and put it all into sort of a fact sheet to get as much clarity in one fell swoop. I think that's probably the best thing to do at this point.
Okay. Because what I will ask for then, at our next meeting, which I think is April 2nd, we'll get into that in a minute, but I'm going to ask for that to be an agenda item for clarification on this, because this 7.3, 7.2, 8.15, it's kind of, what does that mean? What is included in that? You know, the age-old story, let's keep it simple. And right now, it's a lot of confusion that I'm seeing.
And I just have a statement to make, just for the benefit of the audience or whoever might watch this later. What we're discussing here doesn't like violate any generally accepted accounting principles, right?
No.
Just want to make sure, because with confusion, that could be a conclusion that people might
Yes.
arrive at.
Again, this is, and that's a very good point to make. And one thing, if you didn't get to watch our auditor, single auditor's presentation, one thing that I'm a stickler on is ensuring that we do things correctly, legally, and the appropriateness of expenditures and revenues. Again, this is a long-standing piece on not only presentation of information, but also budget building between how schools have done it in the past and how we're doing things more accurate, let's say.
Got it.
So, great, Kate, great.
Thank you.
Okay. So, another thing to be added to our to-do list, and also for you folks to communicate to Leon and figure the best way for the presentation of this, okay?
so I think I've accurately updated by highlighting what's kind of still pending for us. We'll see.
That's it? Okay. All right, thanks. All right. More to discuss on that at some point. Next on our agenda is a presentation, discussion, and vote on town financial policies. Just a background, I think the policies are generally looked at and updated every 5 years, correct? And so 5 years ago, they were updated. It was time to do this again. The committee that was established had included, I believe, 2 members of the school committee, 2 members from this board, 2 from the select board, and finance department and the town manager. Our representatives to that were Michael Patriarca and Liz O'Donnell. We got the policies out to us, so if I could just ask who wants to start, just give us a,
You were nice enough to write the email, so I think you deserve to start.
Sure. Okay, you know, for the most part, the policies were in pretty good shape. And I think I said this at our interim update as well. John, our Director of Finance, did a really good job, and you could see the changes on the version that I sent to you of streamlining the language and making it a lot easier to read, and in many cases simplifying the language just so it's a lot clearer, and combining it so it's one flowing document. It's not a separate capital policy. Well, it is, but it reads more cohesively the way John did that. So that was good. As far as the real significant changes, there were really, it boiled down to two major changes. One of them was recommended by Liz and myself, of reducing the limit on the debt services as a percent of the operating budget. And a lot of debate and a lot of conversation on that. Where it ended up is we took the range from 5%, not lower than 5% and not higher than 10%, to not lower than 5% and not higher than 7.5%. It is very important to point out, though, that the calculation isn't as straightforward as you would think. If you did the calculation, I think Mike did it in the last meeting, if you just took debt service as a percent of the operating budget, it's pretty close, darn close to 10%. The calculation that's used is, and this is a very important point because, quite frankly, this is one of the things that I think is coming up as an agenda item down the road. If you exclude, help me out here.
Debt exclusion.
Debt exclusions, and there's a couple of other things that aren't in the formula. Now, naturally, that debt service number is lower, so as a percent of the operating budget, it's lower. So if you did that with that definition, and that's not changing, the way the calculation is not changing, but doing that today, it's currently at 7.23%. So if you did it in total, the gross number, it's 9 point something, pretty close to 10. With this formula, it's 7.23, and we're making the limit to 7.5. We really pushed hard for this change because, as the capital budget grows and the bonds grow and our debt service grows as a percent of the budget, left unchecked, it could become unwieldy. So that's why that was important to us, and that's where we ended up on that particular item. So, questions on that?
No, may I
Clarification?
think some of the resistance from the other committee members, which makes sense based on the roles that they play, was will it give us the capacity to provide what we need to provide for the town, whatever we're looking at for buildings and schools, et cetera. And I think that's part of the reason we did push, was it's going to force us to make some tougher decisions, which we feel like we need to make to, protect the tax rate, basically.
And there is a clause in there. This is, in the event of an emergency, I think you could read it, or something like that, you would have to, you could go above the 7.5%. However, to John's point, we'd have to show auditors that that was an exception, and we have a plan to get it back down to the 7.5%. If in fact there was an emergency and cause us to temporarily go above the 7.5%. So that's one change. The other change that didn't get passed, which I would recommend to this group that we propose that it does happen, and has the same effect too, and this was actually recommended by John until John found out that the bylaws prevented us from doing this, but I wholeheartedly agree with it, was raising the minimum of capital from $10,000 to $25,000. So any capital purchase that was, well, capital in quotation marks, purchase that was under $25,000 would have to be in the operating budget. But right now, that's under $10,000. And the important part of that is it inherently forces you to put more in the operating budget versus leveraging that expenditure over time, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, et cetera. So it forces you to have a more conservative approach in your operating budget if $15,000 expenditure can't be capital anymore, and it has to be operating, which means you have to feel that impact in 1 year versus 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. So it's another control over our operating budget to help us, just keep a little tighter lid on the ability to expand that operating budget. That, I think everybody agreed with that until it was discovered that we cannot do that because you have to make a change to the bylaws in order to do that. So I would recommend that we ask that, and I don't know how that would happen.
Be a warrant article that I think Mike and I would both be willing to sponsor, and,
Yeah.
if the board wants to sponsor it, I think that would be great.
And that would go to the bylaw review committee
Well,
first, and then
Yeah,
to us.
yeah, that would go into the warrant, and they would review
Yeah.
it, then we would review it.
So those are the two meaty changes, unless I missed something else.
No, the only other thing I would emphasize is that, he mentioned the bond rating, and, if we had a good discussion about, if we don't stay within the policies, does that hurt the bond rating? And as long as we have a good explanation for something that happened, but you don't make a habit of it. Because on top of the financial policies are the financial goals for the town, and one is maintain the highest possible bond rating. The other is, maintain the general stabilization fund between 5% and 10% of the operating budget. And the last one I want to bring up, because John Heffernan's not here, and he said on the last Financial Policies Review Committee, and he always reminds us of this, it didn't change, but, that our goal is to attain and maintain full funding around pension and other OPEB obligations. So I think that's just important that we all remember as we do our
Good.
job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All set?
Yeah.
Kevin, you want?
Just a couple of observations. On the first question about the debt service, it strikes me that there's a set of rules from Prop 2.5 as to what you can tax, the limits on your taxing ability. And they have the exclusions and overrides and all of that. But it strikes me that the purpose of the financial policy isn't really to deal with that. It's really to deal with, make sure the town doesn't take on more debt than it can handle. And whether it's excluded from Prop 2.5 or not is sort of irrelevant. So, in terms of, for the future, and first of all, God bless both of you for spending, I looked at some of this stuff and it made my head spin. So I appreciate what it takes to look at this stuff. But down the road, we may want to look at divorcing it from the Prop 2.5 formula for debt service and look at actual payments. How much are we really going to spend, whether it's excluded or not for purposes of Prop 2.5. The second observation is just on the question about the $25,000, $10,000. I suspect that $10,000 figure was set quite a while ago, and it just hasn't kept up with inflation. So whatever the correction is, I mean, it makes, when we have an overall, levy over $100 million, the idea that we're bonding stuff that, is $10,000 is kind of crazy. So I'd support any effort to, whatever it takes, a warrant article, I suspect, or whatever the corrective measure is, that it probably makes sense to reexamine that. And, any, department should be able to, or the overall town operating budget should be able to absorb anything up to 25, or maybe, I don't even know, higher, but I'd seriously look at that, and I'd support that too. So, but thanks again for the work.
I wanted to reiterate the thanks as well, and I just had a quick question about the third bullet in your email, Mike. It talks about the debt exclusion, kind of piggybacking on what Kevin said, but what you say here is that the way to bypass the constraint is to put more in debt exclusion. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Because that
Yeah,
one kind of stumped me a little bit.
Quite honestly, it was a recent conversation that we had in a previous meeting on the budget with the town manager, and we actually, I don't think a formal proposal was put up there, but a thought was put up there that, we could go backwards in time and look at what we spent and question whether that should be part of a debt exclusion, which would, be able to change, again, we're taking more money out of out of the calculation, but the levy still includes the cost to pay for the interest on all of that.
Okay.
And to Kevin's point, quite honestly, that was my first go, was I really wanted it to be a simple formula, the gross formula. You know, look at our debt service and divide it by the operating budget. Anybody can do that. And no, nothing can be excluded. That would resolve that issue. But I felt there wasn't an appetite with the rest of the committee to go. Quite honestly, it was a challenge of Liz and I were in the minority of even getting to the 7.5%. So I felt that was it was a bridge too far to fight that calculation at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, see, that's where I was stumbling a little bit, because it sounds to me, based on what this says, I was under the impression that putting, certain projects or whatever in a debt exclusion situation was driven by other factors versus just, the debt service percentage policy, whatever the number is. So it sounds to me like the town has, I don't want to say free reign, but you can designate where you want something to go. In the end, the bottom line is still the same. You're just moving something somewhere to satisfy a policy, and I
probably wouldn't go as far as to say.
Oh, okay.
They have free reign. I mean, there are rules.
Well, okay, that's-
As to when, what
Okay, that's-
can go in, and John can reiterate that more of what can go and can't go into a debt exclusion.
That's what I thought.
Town.
Okay, thank you.
But just in a recent meeting, we brought up changing those rules, which is
Okay.
concerning to me.
Yeah, well, like I said, the sentence here says just put more in the debt exclusion. I'm like, okay, sounds good, but
Yeah.
I thought there were rules, and you hit the nail on the head for me. Thank you.
Liz?
I might be wrong, but some debt exclusions, do all debt exclusions have to go to the ballot, the general ballot? Yeah, so they have to go to the general
Yeah,
ballot, too.
that's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah, but you're referring to Leon's budget message, page 11, when he was talking about, sort of blue skying about what are some possible revenue,
Yes.
opportunities
Yes.
instead, seeking a debt
Exactly.
exclusion for recently completed.
For recent completed
Yeah,
projects,
yeah.
which my personal opinion is that's a dangerous road, slippery slope to go down.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
And the other thing I would say too about the 7.5, and part of the reason I think we argued for it, it's also was recommended by, our friend from the Collins Institute,
Yes.
that we lower it, and also when the DOR presented to us, they also looked at that.
And I believe the recommendation was even lower than 7.5.
It was, yeah.
It was.
It was 5, I read.
Yeah.
That was from the long-range financial
Yes, yes.
thing. Proposal. Mike?
Just curious about how these policies and how our actual situation compares with our peer towns. Do we know?
We looked at a few, not all, and I think the few that we looked at had lower.
Actually, that
It helped
helped a
us,
lot. I
yeah.
think we looked at Foxborough and I forgot the other town. But they had
Norwood,
lower
maybe?
debt service ratios, and which helped our
Yeah.
cause.
All set, Mike? Okay. Any other questions? John, anything you want to add?
I
Why do you
like
move
to-
back? Just say.
I'll just take out everything. I only like to add one other little thing that I threw in there. And one of the things that I personally like about the policies that we added in there was, and it's an onus that's put on my department, which is to review the capital projects and make sure that they are closed out within the constraint of a timeline, so that the way that when we are doing and committing funds to a project, that we are committed to doing those projects and not letting the funds just sitting there and letting those projects stay. And then what ends up happening is that now inflation takes place, and we don't have enough money, we're doing this all over again. So there's a constraint in there that we will be reviewing these and closing out projects for, I believe it's no more than 5 years we'll be staying with this. So that's something else that's in there as well that I really do enjoy. I think it's really important.
Michelle?
And by that, do you mean, is that what we just recently did the last town meeting, where some things got moved to similar, they had to be kind of similar types of projects, right?
Correct. We would close out funds if they were not being used. A couple years ago, when we closed out funds to free cash, back in 14 timeframe, 15 timeframe, there was a whole swath of projects that were on the books that got closed back out. This is making it more of a reoccurring process, rather than, oh, let's look for ways to close these things out, let's do these reviews. We should be doing this every single year. There's strong financial control,
So it can be closed out to free cash or to other similar projects? is that
depending
correct?
upon where the appropriation came.
Okay, great, thanks.
Anyone else have any questions? Again, I want to reiterate thanks to our two colleagues for their time and effort. When did you start this, last
June?
June?
Sounds longer than it was. We had some delays between meetings.
Yeah, there were a lot of delays for the summer especially.
Well, those things happen, but thanks for putting the time and the effort into it. This goes a long way toward our bond ratings, too, that when they come in, that's one of the things that they want to look at, which I'm sure was part of the presentation, so. All righty. The Select Board has already endorsed these, correct? Yeah, so, what's the phrase? Motion to accept the updated, motion, is there a motion to accept the updated financial policies for the town of Dedham?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none. On the vote, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passes. So I can legally sign the thing now. Okay. Thank you.
Is there a photo up?
Who gets the pen?
You get one of those plastic Zola bills and put it up somewhere, so, okay, great. Moving on, we have now some hearings on warrant articles. The first one for tonight is warrant Article 5. Which concerns, I'm sorry, I didn't have this open. 5 is Article 5 by the Director of Finance to see what sum of money the town will vote to raise, appropriate, or transfer from available funds for the payment of outstanding bills of prior fiscal years, or take any other action relative to. Are there any prior year bills?
There are none.
Yeah.
Super easy article. We've done a great job ensuring that we're paying things on time, so nothing,
I think this is the first time in
Yeah.
10 years, anyway,
At least,
right? Yeah.
time we've been around.
there were two that were on my desk, and we came to find out that they are revolving funds, so it doesn't need to be blown. Easy peasy.
Excellent work, thank you. All right.
That one felt good.
Next one is Article 7, which is, again, by the Director of Finance, to see what sum or sums of money the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds to one or more special purpose stabilization funds, or take any other action relative thereto.
Hey, this is also another very easy article, just a little background for the people that are in the audience. Article 7 used to be one of the mechanisms that we used to have to transfer money to the Capital Stabilization Fund, more formally and lovingly referred to as the Robin Reyes Fund. This was a mechanism to transfer money into, and then at a later article, we would transfer money out back to the general fund. We have changed that process. There's no need to, we do not transfer money in to transfer money back out. And so in this article, we have no special, and on the screen now is the backstory of what these special stabilization funds are. As you can see in Article 2, we have multiple versions of a special stabilization funds, right? We have the Capital Stabilization Fund, which is what Robin Reyes is. We have a Special Purpose Stabilization Fund as well. And whether or not that's like DVAC, which, again, we have. And then the General Stabilization Fund, also referred to as like a rainy day fund, but we'll get to those. Effectively, we do not have any at this time. This is just a little background slide for anybody that is out there of what a stabilization fund is. It's really to provide long-term stability to operating finances and look for long-term.
Okay. Michelle?
Nothing in Article 7.
All right, can you just clarify, 'cause so this says none at this time, but a second ago you said we don't do this anymore. So I'm just wondering, is this like a policy decision that we're not doing it anymore, or that's just that we're not doing it this year?
So we're not doing any of this year. This might be required for in a case in which a fund becomes insolvent or has overexpends. We may be required at a later time to transfer money in, but this year, right now, for this Article 7 for a Springtown meeting, we do not have anything to present.
Okay. And so that means that the only money that's in Robin Ray's is what, or that will be going into Robin Ray's is what will come from the regular meals and
Correct.
taxes.
Which in the following slides, I will show exactly how much money is going in, how much money is coming out, and
Kevin?
So I assume if we built another school, for example, we'd have to start putting money into the Robin Rays again.
we'll cover that a little bit, but I would highly suggest not touching Robin Reyes or loading any additional monies to the Robin Reyes. In that article, you will see that the debt service that is required for the Robin Reyes is greater than what's in the Robin Reyes fund, and what generates the Robin Reyes fund as of right now. Anyway.
Right, but in other words, isn't Robin Rays intended for anything over 10 million bucks?
It's intended for those types of large
So
capital verticals.
if we built a new school, wouldn't it be funded first from Robin Rays and then supplemented or not?
As a basic just numbers wise, assume that the debt service as of right now is close to $6 million that is being absorbed by the Robin Reyes Fund, that it was voted to be used for the Robin Reyes Fund. The Robin Reyes Fund as of right now is only generating just over 2.
Right.
So to put on any more debt service onto a fund that doesn't currently have a revenue.
So what would you fund it out of?
I would highly suggest debt exclusion.
It would have to be a vote,
It would have to be voted.
Okay.
That would be my own personal suggestion.
Okay.
because right now, and watching some of the presentations that the SBRC had, there is no capacity within the Robin Ray's Fund
Right.
at this point to fund any projects that this was like shovel in the ground is the phrase that was used for Robin Ray's over the years, but, because what's coming in terms of the hotel and meals tax doesn't even pay for the debt service.
Correct.
So the remaining balance on the debt service is being paid by tax revenue, tax money, raised and appropriate money, so.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any questions? Okay, Article 8, by the Director of Finance to see what sum of money the town will vote to appropriate from any special purpose fund and from one or more special purpose stabilization funds to one or more stated purposes for such funds to be expended at the direction of the specified officer or multiple member body of the town. That's a lot of
A
words.
lot of words. So the last article, we're transferring money into those stabilization funds. This article is taking money. So this, again, is the Capital Stabilization Fund. People refer to this one, again, as the Robin Reyes Fund. We're going to get into this in a minute. But again, these monies are, the Capital Stabilization Fund is, again, to stabilize those long-term costs. That's what the Robin Reyes Fund voted in. We have, Dedham has all revenues from meals and hotels taxes, revenues transferred directly into this fund. It circumvents the general fund completely and 100%. So these monies go directly into the stabilization fund. So there's this one, and we also had the Dedham public TV that we're going to be transferring money out as well, but we'll get that into the arrangements. So I know that this one is a little bit tiny, but at the same time, I wanted to provide both pieces to it, and I will, in the next slide, we'll consolidate them both down into one. But you can see the top one, those are the meals. Those are what the revenues have been coming in from the state for meals specifically to the town. You can see that in, there's this little downtick on the far right-hand side. That would be where you would anticipate a global pandemic. Now, hotels, as you can imagine, there was a massive drop in hotel revenues. And you can see in 2020, that last quarter, that purple one, you can see how it just stops. Then 2021, there was very minimal, and then you see it coming back. You can basically tell from 2019 to 2023 that it's pretty much come back all the way around. Can you go to the next slide, please? And so combining those two together, you're gonna get to where you see in FY '23. Again, these revenues have come in and these are deposited on a quarterly basis as the last one. The last piece, we'll talk about the next transition, the next deposit when we anticipate that to come in. But we've rebounded pretty much right exactly to pre-pandemic levels. So when we go to provide a recommendation to town meeting, I can only recommend what is in the fund, what is currently available for expenditure. I cannot provide a recommendation in anticipation for what's coming in next fiscal year. I can only do what is currently in the fund. So what you saw in last year was the transition, as we were talking about transferring in, transferring out, and what we can supplement, that this is where you're seeing come to fruition. Next slide. So on this slide, you can see where it happened. You can see that the wonderful, everybody hates to see that number 0. That number 0, effectively, consider that to be the fund is at a 0 balance when we started end of last fiscal year of '23. So starting in FY '23, now we have the money that has come in, and now FY '24 has begun. We had that transfer out that took place, that 1.849283, that was on last article. Money came out, starting position, and then money that has come in thus far. So on that top right-hand corner, you see forecast 1,841,053. That is the money that we can effectively vote out at this time. So that is going to be the recommendation here. You go to the next slide.
Sorry, what figure was it, John?
The top right corner, you see there's two, on FIS forecast FY '25, 2.34.
Yeah.
That second number down, that 1.840 is 153. The next slide will actually show that in a little bit greater detail. So that's going to be the recommendation. Again, that is the amount that I can actually present to you to state this is the money that we can vote to offset debt service, is that funds, as of today. I want to point out that as of the end of the month, we should be getting another distribution from the state. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about hotels, right? About what the distribution has been, what we can anticipate. I have not seen as of yet a change in those distributions from the state. However, with that said, I cannot force, I don't know what that is going to be at the end of this quarter or how long that's going to continue. So I would just point it out. I thought it was just an important fact to point out to here is that last March, we did have 2 distributions in this last quarter, which total about $500,000. So as we go into deliberations in the next couple of weeks, we will have a new number as far as what has been deposited. But again, that number can be changed as far as what can be recommended.
How much in arrears is the payments from the state come in? They're not really up to date, so are they a 6-month look back in terms of what happened 6 months ago, 4 months ago, whatever? Do you know that, or?
I believe.
I'm saying, because some of that meals,
behind.
some of the hotel tax might not have caught up to what the payments were, but then when the situations arose with the hotels in Dedham, we could have gotten the payment, but it's not going to reflect that time period when it started, correct? Or can you find that out?
I have been trying to find that out, and it seems like the lag is only up to 6 months, so it's either 1 or 2 quarters, and that's why I'm really have with bated breath looking at the March distribution. Hence, again, another reason why I'm only presenting this total amount and not suggesting anything and above, even if I anticipate $200,000 coming in, even on the conservative end. I just figure it behooves us to not.
So what you're recommending on Article 8 is, what's the cutoff date for that? That would have been,
That's as of today. That would be the distribution as of December 31st. Because that's the last quarter that has been distributed in. We would have one more that would be coming in at the end of this month,
so December 31st, 03.
23.
23. So we're still 4 months, we don't know.
Correct. So there would be a deposit that would come in. Now, just for discussion purposes only, assuming that money comes in now and we will get another distribution in at the end of June, those monies stay in that fund. As stated earlier, those monies go directly into that fund. it would help offset the FY '26.
I was just gonna say, so those would be applied to the next year's budget?
Correct.
Okay,
So
so,
just keep that in mind as we're all talking
so
about.
this is up through December of '23,
And again, all I can present to you is what is in the.
and the rest of this is an unknown factor right now.
Correct. In a couple of weeks, we can read.
Kevin?
But if, for example, like you could recommend to town meeting any figure up to whatever was in the fund as of the date we voted. So for the sake of argument, if we were going to get something between now and town meeting, we could do the band room, you know, whatever the additional, I mean, you know, 100 grand, 200 grand could make a difference.
That is correct.
You know.
But that money would only go to debt service.
Right.
Right.
yeah.
So that would
Yeah.
affect.
But
so-
otherwise, we're going to have to make up the difference out of the operating budget anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So
So-
it really is coming
It
off
has a
the
direct
levy.
effect to the tax levy,
Right,
is where you're
exactly.
going with that.
So it's coming
yes.
off the levy, if we can get, so how much would you expect we'd get between now and town meeting? Again,
So meals have been pretty good as far as anticipated from year over year. So I wouldn't see, again, I don't have a crystal ball to tell you what that's going to be.
Yeah.
But, you know, I would probably count on some meals revenues coming in. Hotel, I don't want to opine on that one, if you don't mind.
Michelle?
So is that what we have done in the past? Like, we typically transferred what we knew at this point through December? Or do we add in what we get? And are you recommending that we do that, and what have we done in the past?
So last fiscal year, we were in that transitional period in which we had to do only what was available.
Okay.
In all prior years where you had a fund balance, it was declining as debt service was coming on. So, you know, when the ECEC came on, the debt service and the revenues kind of offset each other. Then the next building came on, and then the decline was, you know, increasing. And then the last debt service came on, it was, again, another 30.
So what you're saying, like, we were basically just taking what we needed for debt service because it was higher. So
Because it
this
was
is-
higher and it was coming.
This is new, that it's not enough, so we're taking what we can.
And it was projected back in 2018, 2019, that this was
Yes.
going to happen,
Yep.
and that the
Yep.
money needed to be transferred in order to remain solvent, and, but again, it was a much higher, and no one could have predicted the millions of dollars of lost revenue that was coming in the pandemic.
Right.
Right.
To exacerbate that situation.
Anyone else have? So we're clear on that. So I think Kevin's point is well taken. If there's any additional funding that's received, we can always use the band room to vote, which, again, would help our debt service for FY '26, so, '25. Michael?
If I could, just help me understand the purpose of the Robert Reyes Fund. So is the purpose for it to identify certain projects, capital projects, that it would fund, theoretically, it would fund the debt service on those capital projects?
Correct. In theory, the fund would work in such a way where money would be set off to the side, generate a fund balance, and then as the taxpayers voted on a new project, it would become a sinking fund. It almost looked like a wave over time.
But somehow, the Robin Reyes Fund took on more debt than it could afford to pay the quote-unquote mortgage. How did that happen, and why wouldn't there be a control that, you know, like I can't go buy a $50 million house if I can't afford the mortgage? Why wouldn't there be a control to limit the amount of debt that we would put through the Robin Reyes Fund?
Okay, I can answer
I know,
that.
I'm sorry, I know it's
No,
my
no,
These are
question,
great discussion points.
but,
Great discussion.
but I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, Robin Reyes Fund was established for major building projects, shovels and ground, that was the terminology that was used for it. And the designation was, because the state at that point had come out and allowed cities and towns the opportunity to raise meals taxes or hotel taxes, and then they could, above what the state takes, and then to be able to use for projects. Some towns just use it for their operating, put it right in. Others, Dedham, established, which was then not the Robin Reyes Fund. It was, that title was added on later, but it was a building fund, I think we used the word stabilization fund. money was built up over a period of time, and then projects were started on that. I mean, but at one point, like the middle school project was a debt exclusion question, and that was funded. The Avery School and Fields project was again a debt exclusion. It was not out of the raise fund. First target for the raise fund was,
I believe it was the ECEC.
yes, the EC, thank you. And that was a vote it was not debt exclusion, so it wasn't a vote of the town people, it was, town meeting voted it. And that was the first project, thank you, it was funded by the Robin Raise Fund. Historically, there was thoughts that over a period of time, there was, being historical now, there was talk about a police station, which was going to be built, could be built out of the Raise Fund. When it came about that there was issues with the fire station at the same time, rather than waiting 8 years between a police station and then the fire station, the two projects were combined, which added a lot to the service, the debt service of the Robin Raise Fund. The renovations and purchase of this building was out of the Robin Raise Fund. And so what was at one point projected out to be, okay, we'll do this project, and then 8 years later, we're gonna do this project, and then 10 years later, we're gonna do this project, all consolidated. So it just used up used up the capacity of the Robin Raise in terms of the meals and hotel taxes, and then it went into the taxes, the property tax level that people are paying. Clarification, and I think there's people that would argue with me, but I'm going to say it. When it was first established, there was from some people's thought process, the Robin Raise Fund would pay for everything. There would at no time would tax money be put into it. That was not the case. And as a matter of fact, when an additional monies were needed for the public safety building, which went from 45 million to 55 million, as I recall, it was made very clear at town meeting that this was going to be paid for out of raise and appropriate money, the tax money.
If I may add.
Yeah.
But we obviously knew, it's pretty consistent. You can count on $2 million a year for meals and hotel. You can do the simple math and figure out how much debt you can afford based on $2 million a year. Why would you put all these things through the Robin?
Michelle, you want to jump in before I?
Yeah, and I don't know if this helps or not, but, so I would say Robin Race was just a new tool and another tool when the state basically allowed towns and cities, this was fairly new, I think it was under the Patrick administration, that the state said towns and cities could start taxing state hotels and meals above what the state taxes and have their own rules for how they, distribute that money. And so obviously, we've been building things since long before that. So this wasn't like the only way we would fund things. This was just another tool how to fund things. And I think there's debate about people who thought everything would go through that or not. But it's not like we could only build to what we could afford in there. That was just another pocket to take money from when we were building things.
Okay.
Before hotel and meals tax and before Robin Raise, all the debt service got paid out of the operating budget. You just appropriated, if you had $10 million, that you had to appropriate $10 million. So this was another stabilization fund. It was a way to cushion the blow of a new school or a public safety building or whatever. And some people took it as a godsend that would solve all problems, and it obviously didn't.
It felt that way for a while before COVID,
Well, for a while, it was
Yeah.
great.
And to touch base on, Michael, on your question, because there was discussion at one point, okay, police station first, 8 years later, fire station. When the opportunity became available to do the two of them as a complete complex, so that if you say the projection of the expenses for the 8 years down the road rolled into the police and fire that we have now. That was one of the variables that entered into the financial picture of the Robin Raise Fund. So that was a consolidation, and I remember sitting in meetings when they said, oh, we're going to do the police station, then 8 years later, we're going to do this, the fire station, and then 3 years later, there'll be a school or something. It just didn't work out that way. But that's how that evolved, and it was town meeting decision.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry to take up the time.
No, it's a very good question. I get to put my historical perspective out, which is sometimes flawed. I'm sure I'll get questions, but that's all right.
So that's the capital stabilization fund, the Robin Reyes Fund, and what the recommendation is at this time. So the next piece that we transfer out from is for Dedham Cable. Nancy's usually in here to say the same thing every single time, which is effectively for viewership and participation. Money comes into Dedham and we pay for the Dedham apportionment of this. We collect it, but we're still paying the bill for it effectively. So this is where the money comes in, comes right back out. And what you see here is the post date. I pulled this directly from in and out. So these are what's come in thus far that we have not transferred out. And as you can see, it's that final bullet point, which says, final recommendation waiting on completed town accountant's review. I like to ensure that the town accountant has one final stab at this. I want to make sure that the numbers are 100% accurate, but this is what has come in right now. So barring any other minor adjustments, reconciliation between us and Dedham Cable TV, that's the number that is currently in the books. So that $354,018.32 would be transferred directly out to Dedham. Any questions?
This is completely levy neutral, has nothing to do, it's a pure revolving.
Absolutely, purely. It also circumvents general fund as well.
Yep.
This is not paid for out of the taxpayer dollars or the.
Thank you.
All set on this? Okay. On to Article 9, which is by the Finance and Warrant Committee to see what sum of money the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds for deposit in the general stabilization fund or take any other action. So that's basically, are we making a deposit to the stabilization fund?
Correct. And the key point in this one is really the bottom one, or let's back up to that second bullet point. This is the rainy day fund, as most people commonly think of this. This is in the event that things should drastically happen, that there's a pool of money that can help stabilize, as in the definition, operating expenses and so forth. So one of the great things is that this is also considered one of the key indicators and help support our credit analysis. So hence why we have a AAA rating is because we keep up with our general stabilization fund. Can you go to the next slide? So with that kind of a statement, I will put a little bit of an asterisk on the keeping up with stabilization fund. When Craig Peacock was in here, the senior auditor from now, oh my goodness, it's driving me. We just switched over. Our auditors. He mentioned the fact that a AAA community, Markham, there it is, Markham. They were Powers and Sullivan, they're now Markham. That a AAA community has a stabilization fund, and our policy says 5 to 10%, which is the right column. And as you can see with the use of the funds, how it's dipped up and down. Craig even mentioned as far as the credit agencies, the use of the funds are there to stabilize during extraordinary circumstances. Well, if you look at FY21 to FY22, that stabilization fund got used for a pandemic. And as you can see, it's aggressively coming back up. So what does that mean? That we're trying, and that orange bar is to our policy limit. So you can see how it was hovering just over 6%, it dropped just under 5%, and now it is coming back up and over. Last year, we got to the 5% amount, and then this upcoming recommendation, you're going to see it's going to push it up even a little bit further. To quote Craig Peacock when he was talking about this, he goes, that is what you want to see from AAA communities, the getting back to this. It's not unwarranted to use this or extraordinary. It's what you would anticipate to see by credit agencies is the use, but it's the getting back to it is the important thing. So trend analysis is just as important as actual figures. So if you look at the trends, this is what's kind of going on in the background. Next slide, please.
Hold on,
Oh, sure.
Michelle.
I just want to make sure I understand. So that orange line is by policy, the minimum percent.
No, that's the actual percentage as what it was in that year. So the blue bar is the actual fund balance, which is on the far left in millions. And then on the far right is the percentage to the operating budget. So, you know, in the
Yeah.
fiscal year 18, you'd see it at about $6 million, which is about 6%. As you go forward, and let's go in FY '22, it fell below because the fund balance fell to about $5.5 million. And then in FY '25, I'm going to, in part of this next piece for our deposit in, you'll see that fund balance coming up. And even though it's not a one-to-one, so let's say it was $1 million to $100 million budget, a one-to-one wouldn't move the needle. So we're moving the needle in a little bit more than to our operating budget, to pull the percentage up a little bit higher.
May I,
Dave,
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
And the policies between 5 and 10%.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
got it, thank you.
Kevin?
You may have touched on it, but I didn't get
Yes,
it.
we-
The left side of the scale is raw dollars,
Correct.
right, millions of dollars. And the right side is a more floating thing because it's percent of operating budget, which I assume has gone up considerably, obviously.
Correct.
So one is fixed and the other is inflationary. I don't get how they
Right,
could
so,
both be on the same chart.
good point. Let me use if we look on the far right side of the chart here, you can see that the bars are going up as far as dollars are going up. But that bar is pretty much flat. That's because as we're putting more money into it, the operating budget is going up as well. So it's staying kind of flat. And that's why I put the percentage on the side to get it, because
That's the one.
we should be into terms of policy. So you're right, Kevin, to your point, is that as
See?
the percentage is fluctuating depending upon the operating budget, but this is, if you boil it all down, the nominal dollar amount on the left has to be in the percentage to the right. So this is where we're standing and this is where we're going. So even though the far left bar is close to where it was in FY '21, that's why the bar is so much lower, because our operating budget is so much greater than it was that many years ago.
We need more to maintain the policy.
Correct.
Right.
Oh, small R,
Thank you. You're welcome. I thought this slide would be helpful
It is.
clarify exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it. So there's our current balances on the top. Now, again, to the policy, that 5 to 10%. You see the policy floor would be $6.9 million on a dollar scale. And then stabilization to a 10% would be the $13.8 million. Just considering where everything is, free cash, everything on that nature, the recommendation this year, as well as what was in, what should be in Leon's budget, is $660,000 transfer in. This raises us from just barely over 5% to operating, and again, this is estimated depending upon where the operating budget ends, would be 5.36%. So again, we're
So what do we got,
slowly-
5 point what?
5.01%. We are just,
Oh, okay.
we did that transfer in the fall to get us to that policy threshold. There was a discussion last spring on whether or not to get us into there, but we did the transfer into fall to make sure that we got to that policy
Right.
floor. Again, this is a transfer in to pull us up a little bit better, to keep on with that trajectory. And again, these can move slightly as far as percentages depending upon what the operating budget actually ends up being. So with that, that would be the recommendation.
So that would be $666,000 for the, from free cash, right?
660 flat.
660 flat, thank you.
Question, I know it's not certified, but where are we roughly in free cash?
For this fiscal year, I can only go off of what was certified in the fall. And so what was certified in the fall was the 7 point, oh my goodness, you're taxing me here. I remember that the total number, as we're doing the free cash analysis, that we had to use for the Springtown meeting was sitting around the $6.2 million, with all other articles that are coming through, which I can show at a later time when it comes to free cash use. It's pulling the free cash down to low 2 million.
How much?
Low 2 million. So just over $2 million from the 6 to 2. It's a significant hit this fiscal year, which we will be discussing in line item transfers, capital uses, and things of that nature.
So with all the appropriations, starting with the 6.2, what's in the present budget, we're looking at a balance right now of approximately how much again?
It would fall just over $2 million of free cash that is in this fiscal year. Now, again, that's as of this time. We're talking that there are other things that are happening in the current fiscal year, that will change that free cash balance at the end of June 30. So that $2 million may grow as well.
With that caveat, that $2 million would be if we vote the town manager's.
If you vote everything associated with line item transfers and capital, everything all inclusive, that free cash number would fall to around there.
Can I ask you this, historically, at this point, could you look back and see what our free cash balance was at this particular time over the past 3 or 4 years? Just as a reference point for us?
I believe I have that on my analysis, on the free cash analysis as well. And I want to say, and this is just a general number, but I will get the hard figures for you all. The free cash that was ending was somewhere in the $4 million range after everything's said and done.
Which year? Last year, you said?
Just historically, if we're talking about the use and things of that nature. This is just number, and again, this is just.
I don't want you, I think it's far better if you just take your time and
Yep.
get that figure to us, because I think that's important for us to know moving forward, because things come up that aren't figured on, or emergencies come up, and we've always maintained a fairly healthy free cash balance after monies have been appropriated with Article 3 and Article 4 and some of the warrant articles, but I'd like to see, and I think we all would like to see, I'm not going to personalize this, that where we stand in referencing the last 3 or 4 years, please. 3 or 4 years comfortable for everybody?
Yeah.
Mike?
John, is there a dollar limit or a ratio limit, not limit, target that we want to have for bond ratings on free cash?
Not in free cash as its standalone number. So bond rating, and just for everybody, great question, by the way. So we just had our call with S&P, because we're about to do our issuance in the next couple of weeks. And that went very well. And they look at the total liquidity of the town as a whole. So unencumbered fund balances across the entire town. And we are sitting pretty well when it comes to that, around 20%, I want to say, to the operating budget. So in that number, what is quote unquote free cash, that is the number that's sort of in all of those fund balances. So I don't want to say that they look specifically at the term free cash, they're looking across the entire term.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anything else on this?
This will be it on this one.
Article 10 is referred to the bylaw, so we'll be hearing from that at some point. Article 11 is by the Director of Finance to see what sum of money the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds to operate the sewer and stormwater enterprise funds for the fiscal year commencing July 1st, 2024. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, everyone.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Sorry it took a little while.
That's all right.
So I'll lead off a little bit on this one. You all have a little bit better presentation, if you wouldn't mind going to. Actually, we'll start here. What an enterprise fund is. Everyone should be familiar with this, but for the sake of the argument, for the people that are in the virtual audience, enterprise funds are self-sustained. They generate their own revenues and fees outside of the tax levy. These come to you in terms of fees, such as for the sewer and stormwater fee that was instituted last year. These generate their own types of expenses for their particular purpose, and the revenues offset those expenses. When we talk about capital in the coming articles, it can also have debt that is associated with the fees, so the fees offset those debt services. So if you think about a sewer line that needs to get put in, it can issue debt and therefore attach fees associated with that to pay off those debts. What you see in front of you is I like to consider this to be the anticipated operating budget. We have, with that being said, we have an enclave tomorrow between Jason, Joe, Leon, myself, our town accountant, and our utility biller. We will be sitting around talking about all things stormwater related in order to determine fees associated with that as well. As Jason talked about last year, and we talked about in great depth, is that we would be looking at these year over year to ensure that the fees were appropriate as we move forward. So with that being said, I wanted to point out that we left sewer receipts the same. We're not changing sewer rates. We are not changing the stormwater, if you will, for the cost of the expenditures at this time. What you will see is a small change down in this presentation right here, and that is coming from indirect expenditures in particular. The indirect expenditures were the costs associated with starting this whole project up, all the different departments and everything coming together, time and resources expended in order to get the stormwater up and running. So that's where you're seeing this little change. Again, I cannot stress enough that this is, as of right this second, tomorrow we will be sitting down and talking some more with all of those people. So we will be coming back with a much stronger recommendation, much like what we discussed about with the hotels, Robin Reyes funds, that things will change depending upon the receipts coming in. I'd like to think of it in the same context as that, where we are going to be sitting down talking about expenditures and talking and determining the exact receipts that are required to be billed to pay for the expenditures. So with that, that was my little spiel of this.
Thank you. Questions? Kevin?
Sewer and stormwater are completely separate and not interchangeable. The dollars, you can't move them from one to the other, is that right?
That is correct. We, two separate and distinct purposes.
And they're all completely levy neutral.
Correct. These are not on the tax levy. These are revenues associated, very much so, with the revolving funds where it circumvents the general fund. These receipts go directly to those funds.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Just to let us know, it says indirect expenditures. What's involved with that?
So indirect expenditures, and this is something just for everybody, ease of mind onto that. DLS, which is the Department of Revenue, Department of Local Services, reviews these calculations as well. What it is the costs of doing business in the town. So the town's offsetting costs. So if you think about it, IT is over there supporting sewer enterprise. If you think about it, central services are supporting the sewer enterprise fund. So the sewer enterprise fund, or stormwater as well, the utilities, are transferring into the general fund to offset those costs. And what you will see for everybody here, as well as our audience, is that usually on the front, second, third page in, you'll see a consolidated budget. You'll see about 4 lines down, a transfer in from enterprise funds. That's what we're talking about there. Those monies are coming into the general fund to offset the costs associated with the general.
Actually, I sort of glibly said that they're levy neutral, but my recollection is from our Saturday session, whenever that was, seems like forever ago. There was a shifting of the cleaning the storm drains that used to be picked up by Public Works, I think, that's now going to be paid out of the stormwater fee, is that right?
That is in the discussions for tomorrow, 100%. Yes, that's something that we've looked at other towns in which they've done. Stormwater fees have been collected to offset stormwater-related costs. Cleaning of stormwater drains in particular, other towns have done that, and it is an applicable expense that we can.
And that's already baked into the town manager's recommendation, isn't it?
Again, we're going to talk about that tomorrow and
But I mean, the
greater
numbers
detail.
that we were given, Don't they include a
Yes.
The
credit?
town manager's budget.
Yes, the town manager's budget.
Because what he did was include the leaf pickup. Was,
They're two different.
Right.
there was another one, Michelle?
No, I think leaf pickup and stormwater are
Yeah.
both mentioned.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they've come out of here, but they maybe aren't included in here yet?
I want to, there's a lot of validation that I need to
Okay.
do tomorrow, and it's just a timing issue of when we were able to get all those various people in the same room at the same time with also many moving parts. It's just the timing of when this article came up versus when we can finally schedule it, and obviously, we scheduled it as quickly as we could, hence why it's tomorrow. But again, this is a relatively close budget to what I would anticipate.
When you get there, and I appreciate this is more pieces to move around, but could we get a figure of the net, because this is a shift. If, apparently a pretty significant one from something that was on the levy to going off the levy. And I'd be curious to know what the net figure is in terms of the levy impact.
What are we looking for on this one?
Of the two things, I guess, leak
And-
pickup and
Right.
storm drain
Yeah.
cleaning, yeah. Thank you.
Michael?
I'm looking at this sheet, which we got this evening, which I think is the same as what we have on the handout number-wise. And I need a little refresher. I'm looking at the estimated budget for fiscal year '24, the third column over from the left, and I totally get the increase, in the expenditures. It's pretty obvious what it is there in the middle there with the WRA assessment. Then I see the town manager fiscal year '24 and the current budget fiscal year '24. And there seems to be a pretty substantial difference between those two numbers. So I was just, trying to figure out what that difference encompasses. So.
From the
Yeah.
10.996 to the 11.
Well, the 12,336,776 and the current budget, 12,828,482.
line.
Yeah, the bottom line.
Okay.
They appear to both be fiscal year '24 numbers, and I just need a little bit more info for those.
So this one was coming from my working document, so I very well could have, the town manager's budget originally, as we were working through before we set the rates for the current budget, is most likely on that 24, what is reflected there versus what we put in for the current budget. These should match to what is actually voted and approved. If they are not, that's just probably just my lack of updating an Excel sheet. But
Okay.
whatever was voted at town meeting, it is 100% what is in our system.
All right, so if I can just ask one more, please. Sure. The total estimated budget in the middle there, the 12,953,099, comparing that to the current budget, which is substantially closer than, what we see for the town manager's budget, are those the two numbers that we should be focusing on when we look at what the budget will be for fiscal '25?
The two numbers that we should be looking at are on the far right column, the current budget and town manager budget. Those are the
Okay.
two deltas that we're looking at. So the 12,828,482 to the 12,257,510.
Okay.
Those bottom lines, that's where we should be focused, that's really the focus point of this budget.
Okay, thank you.
And I apologize that this is not, the handout that you are looking at is not as clear, and I will be 100% bringing forward some additional breakouts of expenditures, to Kevin's point on what the delta will be, and some more background onto the inputs of the costs. I felt it would be unwise to present to you what is all those changes of cost when we haven't had our enclave tomorrow.
Sure.
I think I'll be interested in seeing with that is, you noted that the decrease for FY '25 was mainly due to indirect costs that were higher this current year because of startup. So I guess I'll be curious to see then adding the things that are going to be added, where that takes it, if it brings it kind of close to what it was this year, or if we're going to have to be looking at increased fees if it goes above that, right?
Yeah, we'll be, yes, and and I know Jason's team has been doing a lot of work on the background and checking and seeing how much phosphorus is coming out and keeping us in plan, and I know that they've been doing a whole lot of work there too. But again, this is just what I'm anticipating at this time. You don't want to move too many figures, but that's what I do know that should be coming down.
Kevin?
We've talked, I don't think for the last couple of years, but we've talked before about the infiltration and inflow issue and the relation between that and the rates, that the more towns reduce infiltration, they got to up the rates to maintain their budget. Is that dynamic still going on?
Yes, we are still doing the infiltration. I'm just jumping in. I'm just saying everything for you.
You're doing a good job.
All right. Yell at me if I'm overstep. We are still anticipating to do the same inflow and infiltration mitigation techniques as we've been doing in the past. And again, lowering to the point is by doing these infiltration mitigation techniques, we are lowering the long-term costs associated with this. So if we didn't do them, the costs overall, what we'd be paying for the MWRA would be much, 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 much higher.
Isn't it more a treading water thing, that we need to do it just to stay even? We're not really cutting, our costs, we're preventing
There's
bigger
gonna,
increase.
yeah, there's gonna come a point where it's not fiscally prudent to remove a certain source of I&I, because if its cost to transport and treat over time doesn't really match the dollar that you put in to remove it. But we're not there yet.
Okay.
So there's still a lot of opportunity to grab those big leakers, so to speak, and remove them, and at a respectable cost to do so, and so it kind of offsets. So we're still getting a bang for the buck. So every dollar that we're spending, we're almost achieving a dollar savings in our assessments over time.
Great, thank you.
Just, if you could look again, just an explanation where it says personal services, where there's been the increases, what's that?
So personnel
Benefit.
services, that's a great line to point out as well. We have stormwater manager, we have a stormwater, and a part-time stormwater clerk involved in that too. And again, these are paid for directly out of these fees rather than the tax levy, because their work is directly associated with this in particular. So that's what you're seeing there. So some of the people, like one person on your staff is partially paid out of this fund as well for sewer, for stormwater, for the sewer one. So that's where you're seeing those changes. There was additional personnel added.
Any full-time personnel out of that?
I believe it's, we have 2 full-time personnel paid directly out of this fund.
Stormwater manager, would that be paid out?
Stormwater manager is full-time, and with that, and our stormwater sewer utility biller is also paid out of this fund as well. So you won't see it in my department budget, she is housed in my department, however, she's paid out of these lines. With that being said, also the soft costs associated with benefits are also included into this line.
That was my next question. So the benefit package is paid out of this, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So 1.5 positions or 2?
2.5, actually almost 3 now, because you have the half.
2 3/4? Is that,
Yeah, sure.
is that okay to say?
Roughly.
Give or take?
round up.
Mr. Chairman, just one.
Sure.
Were those people who were already here whose funding is changing, or are they added positions?
They were already here, they've just moved over. So I believe he was just shifting the actual allocation of the FTEs. I don't believe we've
So
added.
this was a,
Do you remember?
Patrick was the admin or deputy conservation agent
Yeah.
at the time. He moved over to stormwater manager. Alyssa left as the conservation agent. A new hire has in, Meredith is now there. But the stormwater technician is a new add into that department. And it kind of is playing that deputy conservation agent / admin / deputy stormwater manager. So it putting a few hats on that one to make up for the missing admin, but also new work to help us out with the extra work that's coming.
so roughly speaking, 2 FTEs went from on the levy to off the levy. Is that right? Or if that's wrong, if you could just give us.
I think
Because there was some net change to the good from a levy perspective.
From the levy perspective, I think it was closer to a one full FTE, or 1.5, something of that nature.
Okay, thank you.
Because FY '22 and '23, there was personnel expenditures, $99,117. So that was those people were getting paid out of the enterprise collections.
I will have to double check with Leon exactly on the moving
Okay.
pieces, because there were a few moving pieces, as Jason was talking about, how people came in, came off, and it
Right,
just,
and just to be clear, I'm not talking about from FY '24 to FY '25. I'm talking about from the inception of the enterprise fund.
Yeah.
What's the net change? I appreciate that you've already got some people on board and already paying them out of the fund, but, you know, over the year and a half or whatever it is, what's the net effect of the levy? Thank you.
Anybody else? So on this Article 11, in terms of a price, you'll be providing that to us?
we'll be providing a much more
The amount.
detailed and robust report at a later date.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thanks for coming in, Jason.
Thanks, you.
My pleasure.
Thanks.
Have a good evening.
You didn't even have to crack your folder.
Look at that.
Look at that. It's only taken me 3 years to get there, but we got there.
Have a good night.
Jason, you train him well.
Yeah, I'm all hard working for that.
All right.
I think that's it from me tonight.
Correct.
What?
Okay.
Thanks for this. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, John.
The handout was a presentation a lot more helpful than prior. That was the goal.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You're starting to get the hang of it, John.
Again, slow learner, son. Not a lot of things.
All right. Finish that. Old and new business?
Just we have this conversation every year about, you know, at what point are we gonna kind of team back and think, you know, given what the town manager recommended, is that sustainable, not sustainable, what do we think? Do we think, you know, do we need to go back to the town manager or the school department and say, you know, can you think about, you know, changing this, that, or the other? And I don't have any preformed opinions on what the answers to those things should be, just that I always worry that we're way too late.
Yeah.
And that will, you know, when we're in deliberations, you know, they won't have time to process various ideas. So I just throw out on the agenda that we should set aside some time sooner rather than later to have that conversation, see what everybody's take is on, you know, how workable what you've heard so far is. And, you know, do we have any suggestions or any common?
I think that's a good
takes
point,
on
and
this?
I know I talked to Leon briefly today, and we're planning to talk a little bit more in depth tomorrow. But I think one of the clarifying pieces, and I think we have to have that, we have to have his presentation and explanation. Again, he did it a little bit on the Saturday with his message, but the concern about the, where we stand in our unused levy capacity, which is about 1.45 million. Monies have been appropriated, not appropriated. Monies are, part of his budget includes going into what was last year 4.5 million to get us to the 1.5 at this point. That's the balance we're sitting on, for lack of a better term. And I think the ramifications of any additional spending of that money have to be touched on and have to be explained for us, and I think for the taxpayers and town meeting members this year. We had a brief conversation today. I'm going to have a more in-depth with him tomorrow. I think that's something we have to have as an agenda item for an upcoming meeting. Because for us to get the clear picture of what that means for 25 budget, but also looking ahead to 26. So, and again, I think, Kevin, your point is well taken. Do we ask for a 1% additional reduction like we did last year? And what does that picture look like? One question, and this is for John, still here. Town manager's budget, correct me, was reflective of 6.2% increase in spending? Correct me if I'm wrong, or let me look through this.
I apologize, I was actually not here when he was finalizing the presentation or when he completed it.
Can anybody grab that for me?
So I have to,
Wow.
well, Brady has been exceptional on this, and,
Well, looking at general fund expenses summary, the bottom line is 7.2%. Am I correct in my reading?
That's what I see.
Yep,
7.25.
yep. One question that was raised from a colleague, and we've gone through this in the past, but what that approximately translates into for the average residential taxpayer increase. I know we can't project property values, because that's a whole different equation. But I think that if you could get together perhaps with Kevin in the assessor's office, and not a specific, but a general idea or figure, what that's going to, if everything went through, the town manager has in his budget proposal, and it looks like it's, would you say 7.25? Yeah, 7.25. If everything went through town meeting, no changes, no anything, what does that translate into next December for the average increase?
I'll work with Kevin on that.
Please.
And like every year, we try to get the best numbers available.
Yes.
Some of this, as talked about before, with the moving pieces, as Robin Reyes transfer into offset debt service, as well as the sewer, stormwater, indirect costs coming in, and what those numbers change to be as well, we'll get a number to you.
Right. Because I think that, is that your question?
What, different topic, please finish.
Because I think that, that's a driver in terms of what we're going to formulate in a recommendation for town meeting, and what the implications are in terms of the budget.
Related to what Kevin said, if we look at our schedule,
Yes,
so capital's probably going to take some time
yep,
on the 2nd, and we only meet 2.5 times before we start deliberating. So we would have to get that information probably next week, and then know that the 2nd's going to be a hefty meeting unless we can all get together again.
The second is going to be, we had some issues with people and different things, so this is, working with Nancy, this is what we came up with. We're not meeting next Monday because, again, waiting for bylaw, waiting for some of the other mosaics that go into what we have to deal with. I think Michelle and I might want to talk, that we might want to look to adding another meeting at some point. Or, instead of starting, if folks can do it, we did this a couple of years ago, rather than 6:30, we start at 5:30. I don't know if that's agreeable to anybody. I know,
It's tough for some commuters, I think.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm coming from Worcester, so
okay. It's,
a little
you know,
tight.
because I think there's an
I go to
awful,
6,
even 6, for those who, I don't work, so.
I just want to get back to what we talked earlier about reconciling the sort of the format, substance of the town manager's recommendation with the schools, about just clarifying that. But actually, we asked you, John, but actually it would be really helpful if you and the school department were on the same page, and they agreed with whatever the format and presentation, whatever the response is. Because, it's going to be tough enough, I think, without arguing about, numbers and whether they add up to what people suggest.
And I think that's very important, because I believe the school committee, school department is having a budget open house presentation coming up for folks, so I think that might be a priority to get together with Ian and Nan, and just, so the figures that are going out there are the same figures, and and it implies the same concepts. Is it operating capital in there? I know Mr. Langenhorst spoke about some of his stuff being in his operating, so.
Yes, I will be working with them quite a lot in the next week as well. I believe I have 2 meetings on the docket within the next 7 days. So I would be remiss to state that Ian has been doing an exceptional job regarding communication and reconciling the two compared to the prior years. It's been very helpful from the accounting perspective and the budgetary controls perspective.
But not to be crazy, but I mean, you can't have apples and oranges. They all have to be apples.
We'll get on.
Sure.
What, if any, role will the finance committee have as the school tries to reconcile their FY '24 budget? Like, will there be line item transfers or from town to schools, or, and maybe you can't tell us that yet, but
There are,
The preface of that is the fact that they have said they're in a deficit circumstance right now.
I know that we'll be talking about line item transfers at a later date, and without going too much into that discussion, I know that there are some concerns about this fiscal year as discussed before. And that is some of the nature of what we will be discussing in the next week.
Okay.
because I think to Liz's point, like, I think all of this might play into when we want to have our discussion more about kind of our goals for this budget, right? Like, if we don't want to wait too long, but if we do it too early, we won't have all of the information. So I don't know, maybe between you talking with Nancy and you talking to Nancy, we can kind of figure out, you know, is this a meeting we do have? I know we said not having Monday, but is there another meeting next week, or do we need to wait till we have more detail on the 2nd and get another one in before the 8th, or, you know?
That's a good point.
I'm not sure we can solve that tonight, but I think it's important, the order of events is important for us to make our recommendations.
Michael?
One observation, you know, just going through this budget process, you know, but there's a lot of, I think as we see the excess levy going down and what's to come, you know, you can see the pressure is being realized, and there's a lot of different things like moving some expenses like we did last year from levy to the sewer. You know, we're talking and I think sounds like it's getting momentum of moving the solid waste removal out of the levy, just out of the levy to privately to the people, seeking a debt exclusion for recently completed capital projects. You know, none of those actions impact what the average taxpayer has to write a check out to. Just maybe different checks, but it doesn't really reduce the you know the impact on them. I don't know if I'm not saying these things are right or wrong, but that may impact what we want to propose maybe for budget cuts, you know, real budget cuts that would also have an impact in prior years to what the average taxpayer has to pay. It just feels to me like there's more talk of these shifting dollars around versus real cuts. You know, it's just an observation, but that we may want to think about if and when we come up with some challenges to reduce the budget.
Sure.
I don't disagree with you, and I remember last year, I forget which, it might have been the leaf pickup, or it might have been something else we ended up not doing. Maybe when we were talking about white goods, I don't know when, but there was something that, you know, we were looking at what is the impact on the average taxpayer if it's in the levy, and what's the impact on the average taxpayer, maybe it was stormwater, I don't know, you know, if it goes to a fee.
Yeah.
And I think that is interesting to look at, because I agree that we need to look at things that aren't just shifting, they're just cutting. But I think there is still sometimes a benefit of shifting, because it more matches the use of the person, right, as opposed to being spread out for everybody. You know,
So that was
like,
trash.
it-
Sorry to interrupt, but that was trash. I mean, you know, they're just going to start studying this and looking at the different models. But I think there is a model where, you know, I only put out 1 bag every 3 weeks, you put out 7 bags. So
So you're
it is a
gonna pay
shifting
less,
of a
yeah.
fee to me, but my fee is going to be less than
Yeah.
if it were.
And I think it applied to white goods, it applied to leaf pickup, anything really that it is getting, even the
Well,
stormwater, like the size of your property.
Right.
So in some ways, when you shift it to a fee, it becomes more fair, because you're paying for what you use. So I still agree with you that we need to cut things that are really cut, but there also is sometimes a benefit to moving it to a fee, is what I'm trying to say.
'Cause-
Because it's more fair how it's distributed. That's
I
the
mean, you
same.
can make the argument that that's how the levy works, right? It's based on property value, too.
But not use. You know, I'm motivated to put out less trash or to, you know, not throw away my refrigerator as quickly as I might otherwise when it's free, because it's not free. It's, you know, we're all paying for it.
Because that was the concept with the white goods, because
Yeah.
everybody in the town was paying for white, even if they didn't use it, they were paying for it. So then that was eliminated, so it was, each person had to, whether you paid the folks to come and pick it up, or you paid when you bought the things, and that was part of your purchase price, that the vendor was gonna take it away. So, that concept,
Yeah, and I
Again,
can cut my trash in half, I can't really cut my house in half.
yes.
Right.
And I mean, I tell you, I was briefly with Leon today, like, but the rubbish and the throw as you go and whatever plan they come up with, that's down the road. I think the immediacy right now is what we're gonna come up
Yeah,
with,
sure.
that we're gonna recommend, the town meeting is gonna vote on. And again, those are the things we have to look at, and I agree, I'll talk with Nancy the next day or two. I think we probably need another meeting before our deliberations. We do have 2 dates for deliberations, but
Maybe the week of the 8th, we have a second meeting.
we could.
Yeah, But I want to say, I hear your point, which is, if we're constantly saying, well, in a couple of years, we're going to shift things, it sort of softens the work we really need to do.
Well, there's only so many options of shifting, right? At some point, you're gonna have to cut,
Yep.
especially when the excess levy is gone. So, you know, if you cut now, it's easier than cutting when the budget's higher.
Yep.
Kevin?
You know, it's coming back to me now about how we did this last year and a couple of years before. We didn't start with what we think should be cut. We said, we don't think this is sustainable. Come back to us with, I think it was a 1%, a 2%, a 3% reduction. You tell us if you had to, whatever those numbers were. And we didn't fix on one or the other. It's, we wanted to see what the impact of those things, and then we ended up settling on the one.
I think
So-
we did make some recommendations, though, too, of
We
like
did.
specific things we
We
hoped
did.
would be in those.
But in the first instance, I think we looked for the people responsible for running it, the town manager, the school department, to come to us. And if you know, if we do that approach again, it kind of, it's not too early to, you know, you just have to go with your gut about, is this sustainable, what we're looking at? And do we need to see some options, whatever
Sure.
those are? And then that gives them more time to, you know, to play through the options and stuff.
I think one of the key elements is for you to get together with Kevin and to come up with what, if Leon's budget went through completely the way it is, no changes whatsoever, there's allocations for or his recommendations for education, et cetera, what approximately would be the impact on the average residential tax payer household coming up? Yeah. Michael?
I just wanted to mention too that we've all been sitting, you know, at this table the last couple of years, some less, some longer. And, you know, we've seen things change pretty drastically from a financial perspective. And this is my own honest opinion. I don't think the severity of the situation has been adequately explained at town meeting. I realized town meeting reps, you know, unfortunately, very few, if any, come to these hearings. They hear firsthand what they get the night of or the week before or whatever. And I honestly don't think, at least in my recollection, that as we've progressed through this, especially post-pandemic, that the seriousness of this situation has been conveyed. I say this for a multitude of reasons, but most importantly, what's ahead of us, whatever that might be, from the standpoint of, the school building situation, et cetera, and anything else that might, come to us. I think it's a little scary, with the unused levy, the free cash number declining as it has, for good reason, I'm not fully confident that those principles have been adequately explained to those folks who are voting on spending or not. So I don't know what, can be done over and above just telling it like it is. And I think it's been told like it is in these rooms, but the bigger message just really needs to be, in my opinion again, needs to be put out there so that people fully understand when they press that yes or no button at town meeting.
Right.
So,
Liz?
Sorry. So Dave and I have been talking, completely agree with you, and we've been sort of, so Dave has his message in the front of the book, but,
Who reads it?
who reads it? Maybe some, some do, maybe some don't. and-
I read the
and
thing
when.
before town meeting last year.
Right, and when do they read it? So we've been talking about potentially this year, putting something out, and not just to town meeting, but to the town, maybe using like the Times or something with a letter from this body that talks through, maybe with Amanda's help and my background, making it as simple and as straight as possible, so that both the town and town meeting members, when we go into town meeting, understand the picture and what we've been through here, and that understand our process. Because we've never really done that as a board, at least in the years that I've been here. We've been sort of Supreme Court, well, the Supreme Court even puts out their opinions, right? We just sort of do our work, present it in a budget book, and let it ride. But this would give us some more messaging around it.
right, and the concerns that we're, confronted with right now, they just haven't existed in the past. I mean, there hasn't been a real, well, there's been a need, but it's more crucial a need now, where, you don't want to be Chicken Little. But that being said, you don't want people to be totally blindsided.
And without context, people come up with their own, spendaholics, right?
Well, yeah, and that's
Or
the
whatever.
furthest thing from the truth as far as we know. You want services, you gotta pay for them, but I digress.
Because again, oh, I'm sorry, Cindy?
Oh, no, just a quick follow-up. As a town meeting member, I did read your letters and your predecessors, but they were always very neutral. And I think maybe we should rethink that message, along those lines, maybe more stronger language, maybe, charts, something that is more definitive. And the idea of submitting things to the Dedham Times would be great. I think their circulation is only like 3,000 households, so we might want to think of other methods, maybe social media. Do we want our own Facebook page? I don't know, something like that. If anyone has that capability or experience, which I don't.
Don't look at me.
Don't look at me either. Just other ideas, because sitting at town meeting, I heard one thing, and then sitting here, I've heard very different things. And I think I would have had different votes if I had known what I know now, so.
Sure.
And whatever you put in the paper, just reading, again, at town meeting, to make sure at least those people in the room hear it.
Because I think, just again, some of the conversations, and John, you've been part of these, is that with that unused levy capacity we have, if you go online to the Division of Local Services, they have a chart that lists all communities and what their excess levy is, and it fluctuates quite a bit, particularly out in the western part of the state. As you get to the more metropolitan areas, it's more than what we have or what we are projected to have. But again, when you go into next, because again, this board has to be concerned with the immediacy in front of us, but also what that immediacy translates into FY '26. And, comes down to it, we're a budget that's 90, 80%, give or take, personnel's, what the school said was 92% of theirs, something like that. Bodies go. Like,
I'm just, to build on maybe your great thoughts there on communication is, we have different audiences out there, and obviously the town meeting members, I think, are the primary audiences, and we have some mechanisms to get out directly to them, and maybe some partnerships to get a little bit of two-way with precinct chairs, and some dialogues, and we can divide up, reach out to precinct chairs, or maybe we can think about some other ways we can engage.
good idea.
Because, yeah, blasting it out, there's a lot of people that, really, it's what counts is who votes. So,
Yep.
and that's 278 people.
Well, if I may, that's a great idea, Mike, with the precinct chairs, because the first thing that came to my mind when you mentioned that was, mini town meeting might be, it's late, but it's better late than never for delivering information that could be distributed before town meeting, whatever that message needs to be. I said this before, we can't force folks to consume the information that is available, but I think we've done our jobs if we make it available. If people choose to read it, great. If they don't, well then, that's the answer to the question if they have any concerns.
Just one quick follow-up.
Sure.
So there is one precinct chair, Meg, who, she hosts a outdoor event before every town meeting for precinct 1 town meeting members, and I get invited, other people get invited, I think I've
You've
seen some of you
been
there.
invited,
Yeah, so she invites members of this, and there's a lot of good dialogue there as an example.
It's a reading of the warrant.
It's a reading of the warrant, yeah, and it's,
Narratives sort of get lost in the shuffle with town meeting, you're for schools, you're against schools, you're for this, you're against that. But like if we had 10 numbers, class size, cost per student, whatever the 10 that we settle on, where we rank with the average residential tax bill. And just
fun facts list.
facts, just pure facts, no editorial. I mean, not to say we're not going to do something else, but to have a standalone thing of just facts, I think could be really effective. I mean, I think Cecilia Butler last town meeting was very effective. I mean, she didn't prevail, but I think she made a lot of people think and was very objective and, just laid out the numbers. And I think it made an impression, even on people that ended up voting contrary to what she was suggesting. I think a lot of people took pause and thought, well, maybe I need to look at this again, down the road. So,
I will communicate with Nancy, possibility, I think your point's good, Michelle, week of the 8th, see if there's another date in that. Does anybody know right now that they couldn't, that they are unavailable for any of those? What, Monday's the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th?
I think the 9th is out.
did you say the 9th of
No
April?
9th for me.
10th or 11th, I can do 10th or 11th.
8 we're meeting, 9th, 10th, or 11th, that's Monday, Tuesday,
I
Wednesday.
could do them.
You can't?
Not the 9th.
All 3 work for me.
You're open.
Either, any of those days.
All right, so you're all set?
I'm good all the days.
Okay, you good?
I'm good.
Mike,
Oh, good.
with the exception of the 9th?
I'm good.
My goodness gracious, it's amazing.
We're boring.
So, did we pick a date?
Let me talk to, because the room availability,
Oh, okay.
what we're going up against, we don't want to have a meeting the night, the select board's meeting. There's a bunch of little things that go into the scheduling.
So Dave, sorry, I don't mean to prolong
No,
this, but
no.
so to Kevin's point, so the rough timeline, I know we don't know when we're going to meet, but we want to get the information from John and Kevin and then maybe think about
Yeah.
if there's a number, but we should do that.
Whatever the next meeting after we get the information.
Do we even have to wait for a meeting to share that direction?
Sure, what? And
If we want to ask for, what would the 1% look like, 2%, do we need to do that in a meeting?
We asked.
Under old new business, we can take it up right now.
But do we want the Kevin, John information first, or?
We probably, I would think we'd want that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
That's
then
right, too.
At our next meeting, we can
Okay.
do it.
And again, it's a range.
Yeah, I just
but-
want to give them time if we decide to
Yes.
do that. Yeah.
On the other hand, John could convey back to, that they should expect an exercise from us, what exactly the question is, what the numbers.
Why don't you,
I will be articulating to Leon the thoughts of this committee tomorrow.
and maybe just to keep things, if any information or anything, send it to me and then I'll distribute it rather. I think that's a better, go ahead.
I think, but see if anybody else remembers, we may have conveyed this already in a bit to the schools, because I think we already know some information about, their level of service that would have been 12% and what they recommended for 8. They gave us a range of what that meant for bodies. And I believe when they were before us, it might have been me, asked the question, well, you have 8, but Leon has 7, so what does that mean? So I don't remember if that was something they were gonna get back to us, but, that I think we could already make sure we're getting that, at least that much, right? Because we haven't heard from them what it means for Leon's budget.
They didn't address what the difference would be, as I recall.
They just said it,
More bodies.
uncomfortable,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think the reference point that Ian made was, we got 92% personnel, so
Yeah.
it's pretty obvious.
And that it's low, yeah, because it's coming back to me, maybe it was you, did the calculation of how many people that would be, but then he made the point that it's usually lower paid, lower paid people, so it's more bodies than taking the average salary, yeah.
And if they get retirements, that's another factor for
Yeah,
them, but,
so we might already have that information.
so just, I'm organized. You're gonna take care of that. Is there any other information that you owe us?
Other than what Michelle was already discussing
Okay.
previously, and I have access to that sheet as well, which I will be
Okay.
going through.
Okay.
And again, articulating what the sentiment of this committee is from tonight with Leon. Brady's been over here listening as well, so we'll be definitely working in conjunction to get everything done.
You mentioned Mike Butler. I had a couple conversations with him, the net position. Is that something that I'll talk to him tomorrow, but have you worked to a point that he would come in and give us a presentation? Because I think that net position is very valuable. I'll call him tomorrow, okay? All right, but that's something we can look to go.
If we
Anything
had a
else?
meeting, that might be helpful at that added meeting.
Yeah, and, okay. So what I will do, now that I can get this thing organized here, the week of the 8th, we'll look for 10th or 11th, okay? And we'll see what else is going on. And even the select board's meeting, we can get a room there or whatever. All right, is there anything else I missed? You got it written down there, thank you. Excellent.
I think I got everything.
All right. Everybody got the update in terms of our schedule for hearings? I asked Brady if, in the next, maybe on Monday, if we could get the information regarding the capital, because capital is Article 4, which is our first, it's on April 2nd. If we could get that, so we have a chance to look at it. That will include the requests, the Capital Expenditures Committee recommendation, and then the town manager's recommendation. Okay? Quick question, Jen. Maybe you know this or don't. We're looking ahead at the second. Line item transfers, do you see that many this year, right now, for this? Approximately, not pinning you down?
We have a few line item transfers that are coming through. Most line item transfers that I'm seeing are held within the department, so nothing coming from outside to sustain so far. But again, we will have.
Okay. Reports of committees, the master plan, I think, is just gonna, that's what I heard, was gonna come in and mention something. Opiate settlements is just a language thing, as I understand it. Amending funding sources for certain capital projects, what is that?
Much like what we were talking about is removing, and I believe that Lauren has allowed, that it can fit into here is closing out capital projects as well.
Okay.
So we're doing the capital projects review
Okay.
processes.
So that might not be,
Hopefully that's the good news.
Yeah, right.
but you never know.
That's the good news part.
I'm speaking, and I'm gonna eat those words, I'm sure, so just looking ahead in terms of scheduling and stuff. But capital will take a lot of time as we move forward, so, on those notes. What else did I have here? Oh, just want to take this opportunity to thank Michelle for doing such a great job at the summit the other night.
I try to get people that want to come to our meetings.
I know, I saw I just caught it the next day, and, hey, it is what it is, unfortunately. But I think in my discussions with Liz, we've got to do some outreach as a group. And so people know what the ramifications are when they want to transfer $500,000 into this account or do this and that and the other thing, because it's all going to come down to bodies at some point, maybe, who knows? So, other thing, you saw it in this, there's no meeting the 25th, is scheduling things, so. Is there anything else on old or new business, anybody? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Liz. Second? By Michael.
Second.
Thank you. I got our two people with the financial policies to jump up. No discussion on the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.